Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. JC here with another video on Action Taimanin. Today we're going to check the permanent UR supporters available in the gacha. But before we start, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe if you enjoy the content. So we already have videos for the permanent SR weapons, the permanent UR supporters in the gacha, the F2P supporters. So it's time that we check the weapons because many of you may want to burn them because you say you're not going to use those, but you shouldn't first, because there's a bunch of things that you can do with the weapons. So number one, remember that you can use the weapons here in the armory, and the premium weapons are some of the best options that we have to increase your attack. So keep that in mind. That's one thing. Another thing that you can do is that you can use your weapons as sub weapons. You maybe like the effect is not that good, but you put it in the sub slot just to provide stats for your attacker. And the more S level you have on that weapon, the better it's gonna be. Like, yeah, you can get weapons on the arena store for sure, but consider that there are some characters that share the weapon, and then you would have to get maybe a copy of the red weapon, a copy of the Crimson, the Viridian, and the Amber weapon. So yeah, that would cost a lot of coins. So it's just easier to build them whenever you get them on the gacha. So before we start, let's check which are the families of weapons, because there are 4 families of weapons that you're gonna see on the premium gacha. One of those is kind of very small and very niche, and well, I'm going to move a little bit down so that we can check a character like this one. Here we can see 4 weapons, but this character only has 3 families. So we're gonna have the weapon that releases with a character and that only works with that character. That's gonna be called the premium weapon. Then we have a weapon that also releases with the character, but this weapon has the same effect on the passive and active for every character. It is a weapon that every character shares. Well, it's not that they share the weapon, they share the family of weapon, and the effect is always going to be the same for everyone. So these are going to be the Momochi weapons. Then we have the renewal weapon. The renewal weapon is going to be given to characters who already have their renewal. Not all of them, there are some exceptions, but nowadays most characters who get a renewal get their renewal weapon, which is meant to be stronger than the original character release weapon. And lastly, Sakura, Yukikase, and Asagi have a special family of weapon, and obviously they share it with Hebiko, with Aina, with Anne Rose, and with Lina. And that weapon is going to be I think it's this one, yeah, the Snare family. Let's analyze the ones that share effects first and foremost. So what is the Snare family? The Snare family is 3 weapons, one for Asagi as I mentioned, one for Sakura, and one for Yukikase. And all of these have the same effect. Increase normal attack damage against snare enemies by 15%, 30% when maxed out, and normal attack deals 48% when maxed out percent of damage against random enemies. So these weapons are pretty bad, just so that you know. You can use them as beat sticks, yes, but there's one exception. The weapon for Sakura and Hebiko is actually good, because both Sakura and Hebiko inflict snare, so they can get the benefit of this. Sakura is really good with the basic enhancer. Like, if you want to attack with the basics, you actually want to use the basic enhancer in most cases. And Hebiko can go with or without the basic enhancer, because its her basics change like drastically depending on whether or not you have the basic enhancer. And both are viable, so you can use it with these 2 characters, and it's a decent weapon. It is not busted, it is not game breaking, it is just a weapon that you can use. and you can take advantage of. For Asagi, Lina, and Rose, Aina, and Yukikase, this family is going to be pretty bad. I do not recommend that you equip it on the main slot unless you don't have anything else. It is just a bit stick to put on the sub slot. Now, let's start with the... I almost forgot. Where is it? Let's check the Momochi weapon family so that we can evaluate all of those in one go. So the Momochi weapon family is going to have a passive and an active. The passive says, each critical hit increases the damage dealt to the target by 4% for 7 seconds and stack up to 5 times. The 5 stack at S level 1 is going to be 20%. The 5 stacks at S level 5 is going to be 40%. So yeah, it is significant, the amount of damage increase. And this is a pretty good weapon at the beginning of the game and for normal content. The active says increases your critical rate by 18% for 12 seconds. That's going to be 36%. It costs 6 particles, that's a lot. But it's well worth it so that you can build up those stacks and deal a ton of damage. It's pretty good. Later in the game, you won't need to use the active when you have like a good S level, a good amount of critical Magatamas, a good enchantment level. You won't need to use the active, but at the beginning it's fine to use the active. So these weapons are pretty good for all the characters. They become a little bit... they are not useful on VR unless you have Bright and Rose. In that case, they become very useful on VR. But Bright and Rose is a limited supporter, so keep that in mind. If you want to build these ones, it is very good as a main weapon for most content and as a sub-weapon for VR. Then, now let's start with the premium weapons and the renewal weapons. We're going to start with the premium because the first characters don't have a renewal weapon. So, Naraku. Naraku is Asagi's premium weapon. This says passive increase increases attack damage by 1% for 8 seconds. Stack up to 50 times, loses all stack upon being attacked. This is going to double, so it's going to be 2. That's going to be 100% more attack. What's the issue with this? That you lose stacks whenever you get hit. And that's pretty bad. Even if Asagi is a character who can slow the enemy and can easily evade their attacks, it's a hassle to have to consciously evade every attack and do a perfect run. It's just bothersome. So that's why I do not recommend this weapon. You can, at the beginning of the game is fine, but it is not the greatest. Because of the amount of effort that you have to put into evading everything. That's about it for this. Like, it's not terrible, but it's not that great. The active removes all the stacks and performs a range attack that does 45% damage plus 8% per stack, which is fine if you build it up a lot, but as I say, it's kind of a hassle. Then we have Phantom Knife. Phantom Knife is basically the same but worse. It says increases critical damage by 1% for 8 seconds during attacks. Stack up to 50 times, lose all the stacks upon being attacked. Remove all attacks, perform an area attack of 180% of damage, plus 8% per stack damage. Yeah, what's the problem here? Like, it's the same. Why would it be worse? Well, because of the character. Sakura doesn't have slow. Sakura has T-Rex arm syndrome, which means she's gonna get hit a lot. So this is a terrible weapon for Sakura. I mean, as I mentioned, you can keep them, you can build them, but use them as sub-slot weapons or armory weapons. Then we have Gridfire. Gridfire is not as bad as the other two, but it's not busted. Consecutive attacks deal 6% of damage against super armor, stack up to 10 times, remove all stacks when super armor is destroyed, and increases skill damage by 6% per stack. So basically, you're always going to have the same attack buff. Like, this is not the greatest, but you get 6% of damage per consecutive attack, and then you get you make that a buff for skill damage only when you break the super armor. So it is an okay weapon. It is not busted, and the idea is that you break super armor ASAP so that you have control over the enemy and they cannot move and you interrupt them constantly. So yeah, it is not great that it revolves around the enemy having super armor, but on the other hand, it is a pretty normal situation, especially in VR. So it's not that bad. And besides, the damage increase is noticeable because it's 12% and it can get 10 stacks. That's a big number. That's a big damage increase. I will admit that much. So if you want to build this one and use it, it's fine, but it's like a whatever weapon. It's not like busted or super impressive, in my opinion. Then we have the Momochi family, as you can see. Then we have Kirin. Kirin is Rinko's exclusive weapon. This has a passive that says normal attack has a 5% chance to deal 120% of damage and make the target groggy. And the active hurls a bolt of lightning that deals damage and knock back the enemy in the line. So yeah, this weapon used to be good at the beginning of the game, but now it's very outdated. The enemy has super armor, well, the difficult enemies have super armor, so they're gonna be immune to groggy. And a 5% chance is very, very low. Even a 10% chance is low, so that's not great. The thing is that Rinko has multi-hits on her basics, so it is not as bad, but this is very outdated due to super armor, basically. So yeah, you don't want to build this. I mean, you want to put it in the subslot at most. In fact, I would say that this gives you more benefit because of the amount of multi-hits. So yeah. Then we have Lapis weapon. Here you see 4 weapons because... not Lapis, Shiranui weapon. We see 4 because we also have the character release weapon for Lapis. And as you can see, this only works for Lapis, even though Shiranui can equip it. So, let's start with Cocytus. I don't know how to say that, but it says... reduces damage from all enemies by 15% while particles are fully charged. So at max S level, that's going to be 30%. That's significant, I gotta admit. But the issue is that you're giving up active and ultimate in exchange for damage reduction. It's worth it on certain scenarios, but it's also like bothersome that you cannot use your ultimate. Like, this weapon would be great if it didn't have the particle charge condition. That would be the case, but unfortunately you have to have it full. So if you pilot Shiranui and you don't like to use the ultimate, this might be useful, but I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, you can put it on VR and you can make the allies not use the ultimate, so it's up to you. You decide whether you use it or not. It's a good defensive option. The number is fine because 30% is kind of a competent percentage for what a supporter would give you. Then, active deals damage and knock up the enemies in an area. It's a whatever active, not that impressive. Shikigiri is the Momochi weapon. The first renewal weapon that we have is Shiranui's, and it says Ithaqua the White Slicer. Increases damage of water weapons by 60%. The final water weapon of Taimanin water flow has a 50% chance to attack in a cross pattern. So yeah, that's going to be a 60% damage increase when max out and a 100% chance to do the cross pattern. I mean, most of the attacks of Shiranui are going to be considered water weapon. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. So you're getting a very considerable damage increase. So it is probably the best weapon for Shiranui. She also has like the best premium weapon for Shiranui. She also has limited options, seasonal options, and those are also competent weapons. But I think this is okay. If you want to use it, do so. And it is perfectly fine for VR actually. Then Scepter of Mastema. Oh, this is horrible. Increases damage dealt by with the skills by 13%. That's gonna be 26%. It is not that great of a number, but at least it's something. And unfortunately, Lapis usually does more supporting than damaging. She's a supporter after all, so she's not going to do that much damage. But increasing the few damage instances that she has is gonna be fine. And then the active deals damage and knock back the enemies. Whatever active. Then we have Yomotsu, which we have already checked, and Cherry Blossom, Cherry Storm. Cherry Storm is Lina's character release weapon. This is passive, increase critical damage by 28%, and deals the active deals damage to the enemy in front and reduces their critical attack resistance by 15% for 10 seconds. Both passive and active are amazing. They are super great. This is one of the few weapons with critical damage increase on a UR weapon. There are critical damage increase weapons, but usually those are SR weapons. And the difference in stats is going to be very noticeable when you see this effect. So yeah, this is a great weapon. It's even better than the limited equipment for Lina, just so that you know. So you want to get this and build it. Then we have Yamata Norochi, that's the snare weapon, and Sila of the Abyss. I don't know how to say that, but this is going to be Heavy weapon. Increases critical damage against enemies by 8%, 16% when maxed out. Active deals damage and knock down the enemies. Attacking affected enemies poisons them by 100% of damage for 12 seconds. The poison is an interesting effect, but the critical damage increase is just marginal. It's terrible. Compared to Cherry Storm, it is just nothing. So I do not recommend this weapon. I mean, you can equip it. It's usable. Not busted, just usable. It is good if you want to use a strategy that revolves around the enemy being debuffed or poisoned. For that's good. So if you want to go red, maybe use this weapon. Then we have Takarasu, the snare weapon. Pulse Trigger. Oof, Pulse Trigger is pretty bad. Increases critical rate by 15% and deals damage and stuns the enemies. So yeah, at max it's going to be 30%. I mean, it is a good number, but you don't crit on VR. And you don't need critical rate. Just by enchanting your weapon, you're going to be able to get critical rate automatically. So yeah, it doesn't do like anything. It's not great. Then we have Agnus Dei. Agnus Dei is Emily's premium weapon. Increases speed by 10% while particles are fully charged, 20% when maxed out. Deals damage and knock down the enemies in the area. Well, it is a usable weapon. It's not like super busted, but it's definitely usable. So you don't want to use the active because it's a high cost, but the speed increase is worth it, in my opinion. Like, you can abuse that along with, for example, the wind attribute Magatamas, and Emily is going to become super fast. So yeah, that's fine. Especially good if you can inflict some kind of debuff with your attacks by using specific supporters. So yeah, it is definitely usable. Not busted, just usable. Then we have Heavenly Chariot. Heavenly Chariot is going to be the renewal weapon. And it is like, it is okay, but that's about it. It's not busted due to the demerit that it has. And due to the fact that it doesn't have a synergy with one of the skills. So it says, Zero System uses skills automatically except for Counter Bomb Trap, Round Slicer, Healing Field, but Emily's normal attack damage is decreased by 30%. Skill damage is increased by 30%. That's going to be 60% when maxed out. So yeah, the damage that you reduce is given to skills. You're going to automatically use the skills that do not use evade as a command. And the unfortunate thing is that unlike Shisui, Emily doesn't move. You have to move her. Like if you're on a daily stage, then she's going to destroy the enemies and then she's going to move. But while the enemies are on the field, she doesn't move. And that's the issue, because on VR, she's not going to be able to position herself properly to use the skills. I don't think the AI would be smart about it if we had that function, but it is an issue. Like, you don't have to do commands, you just have to move the stick, and she will perform fine with this weapon. It is usable. I wouldn't say busted unless you focus on using damage. She certainly has better weapons, but those are either seasonal or limited. Then we have Hawiya. Hawiya is going to be Murasaki's weapon. This is one of the best weapons, or it used to be one of the best weapons until the implementation of VR, because it says each critical hit increases critical damage by 8% for 7 seconds and stack up to 5 times. That's gonna be 16 times 5. That's gonna be like 80% damage increase. No, yeah, because right now it's 40 and double it's 80. My god, yeah, it is super strong. But what's the issue? Murasaki is slow, number one, so it requires like a lot of effort to keep those stacks. And number two, nowadays we don't crit on like the most difficult content doesn't allow you to crit, which is VR. So that's why this weapon, while strong, if you want to tackle VR, it's probably not your best option. But if you want to tackle tower, it's a really good option. The active says that deals damage and knock off the enemies. Yeah, it's a whatever skill, whatever active, as usual. Then we have Machinery X. Machinery X is the renewal weapon, and it is good if you want to use Murasaki as an absurd damage dealer. Like, usually everyone slaps green onto her and she works, and that's fine. But she has other builds that actually work, and she has HP recovery on all colors thanks to the counter. So, when using Great Axe Rengenki, uses 5% of particles and increases the number of hits from the Rengenki skill, then damage of the additional attacks is increased by 5% per stacks. So yeah, it is pretty busted. You want to use this, but what's the issue? That people don't like, or well, prefer to go green because it has Murasaki has like 3 skills that heal her on green, compared to the 1 that heal her on red and 2 that heal her on blue. So yeah, like, it is a good option if you want to deal damage. And Rengenki is one of the most fun skills that she has, so if you want to use it, it's good. Then Unidentified Knuckle X, one of my favorite. This is a super fun weapon. It is not busted, but it is super fun to use. If you are a fan of the weapon actives, this is a really great weapon. It says increases speed by 1% for 7 seconds whenever you use a skill, stack up to 10 times. That's going to be 20% when max out and with max stacks. And the active performs a consecutive attack that deals damage. That sounds like pretty dumb, but it's actually pretty good due to the consecutive aspect of the active. So yeah. And besides, the particle amount of this active, the particle cost, is really low. So using it is going to be amazing. Like, it is one of the most fun weapons that I have used. So if you want to use it, do so. It's pretty fun. And then we have Double Dragon Kajiri. It's basically the same as the Unidentified Knuckle X, but better. Increases speed by 10% and damage of skills by 10% for 5 seconds after using a skill. And that's going to be 20% for both numbers when max out. Then it says, has a 50% chance to reduce the remaining cooldown of one of the skills by 15%, 30% when max out, after using a skill. Reactivates every 5 seconds. So yeah, as I mentioned, it is kind of similar, but better because it's more abusive. So yeah, this is probably the best weapon for her and the one that you should use on BR. Then we have Kurenice. Kurenice is pretty good. Like, how can I say this? It's not busted. You shouldn't use it on BR, but it is a super fun weapon to use. It just has an active and it says, deal damage to the enemies in an area. Gain 200% more particles from normal attacks for 8 seconds. And it costs 6 particles. The cost is high, but trust me, this is really busted. When you have it at a good S level, you're going to be able to cycle between doing the active and doing normal attacks, doing active, normal attacks. And whenever you use this, you want to use the basic enhancer so that you gain more particles with your basics. Yeah, it is a pretty good weapon, pretty fun, but not the kind of weapon that you would use on BR. You can use it on tower, for sure, but not BR. Then we have Unidentified Deviation X3. This is bad, pretty bad. It says skills. Skill attack increase critical rate by 4% for 7 seconds, stack up to 4 times. So similar to Aina's weapon, this only gives you critical rate and that's not good enough. And the active says that deals damage and knock up the enemies. It doesn't even have a good active, so yeah, don't use this one. On the other hand, Skullface is one of the best. Well, after Skullface, all of the renewal weapons start to get better. So this is one of the best weapons that you can use. And it's for Oboro, as you know. It says, when applying debuff, the enemy immediately restores 2%. When applying debuff to enemies, immediately restore 2% of lost HP. Penetration of all attack increases by 11%. And damage to the targets under mind control increases by 20%. So most of the time the enemy is going to be under mind control, so that's kind of a perma attack buff, which is fine. The penetration is a very good effect, and at 22% I think that this is very worth it. And lastly, the debuff part, the HP restoration. Oboro doesn't have HP restoration on her kit, so that's pretty good. And I know that this is deceptive because it says that you'll restore 2% of lost HP, which means you're never going to reach maximum HP. But that's kind of a lie because this doesn't have a cooldown. Whenever you apply a debuff, you restore HP. You can use your Magatamas to inflict debuffs. Oboro's skills inflict debuffs. The active of your supporter might inflict debuffs. So keep that in mind. You have a ton of HP restoration, and you get HP restoration by 2% per each enemy debuff. That's important. Like, nobody takes that into consideration, but it's pretty good. Then, after that we have Deathly Genma. This one only has an active. I haven't tested this, but this might be better than I thought, because it says, deal damage and stuns the enemies in an area, increases speed by 40%. It says 20, but when max out it's 40% for 10 seconds. 10 seconds is a good duration, and 40% is amazing. The most speed that character skills give you, it's like 30% at most, and that's super rare. Usually it's 20. But this is gonna give you 40 when it's maxed out. It's 5 particles, but considering that you're gonna attack super fast, you might be able to abuse this. I'm gonna try to do a build. I wouldn't recommend this under most circumstances, because the fact that you attack fast doesn't mean that you deal a lot of damage. You have to also have a bunch of good supporters that increase your damage. So yeah, like, I'll test this one, but I suggest that you don't focus on this immediately. The one that you want to use is Impact Blade. Impact Blade is busted. Increases explosion damage of Mag Punch, Mag Impact, and Bomb Escape by 20% or 40% when maxed out. Then increases all types of damage of Mag Impact by 50%, 100% when only one enemy is nearby. So when you're facing a single boss or a boss that has, mobs, but they are far away, this is going to demolish them. And those skills are already strong, so they're gonna delete the enemies. Yes, this is pretty good if you want to use Asuka as a main attacker. But the issue is that Asuka will need HP recovery, or basically a healer, because she doesn't heal with this weapon. Then we have the weapons for the convoluted group. This one have 3, so it's gonna be for Kirara, Yomotsu Hegui, and this is going to have only an active, performs a range attack that deals damage and restores 15% of your lost HP, 30% when maxed out. So it is a good weapon. Just there are issues. Number 1, you don't restore HP based on the damage that you deal. It's on your lost HP, which is not the greatest. The particle cost is high, but considering that Kirara is very tanky, is not that bad of an option, and Kirara doesn't have HP recovery, so you may use this if you want to use a supportive tank Kirara. If you want to use her as a main damage dealer, don't use this one. Then we have Luffy's Drop, the renewal weapon. Luffy's Drop is busted. You do want to equip this, and it's very good for challenging content. Has a 15% chance to freeze the enemies for 5 seconds when attacking, 30% when maxed out. When attacking the frozen enemy, restore 2% of lost HP every second for 3 seconds, and increases speed by 10%. Activates every 10 seconds. So the effect only lasts for 3 seconds. That's an issue, especially on the speed part. But it's really worth it because every second you heal that 2%, it can be 4% when the weapon is maxed out. So yeah, it's really, really good. It gives you a lot of sustain, which Kirara doesn't have. Then we have Treasure of the Deep Ocean. Treasure of the Deep Ocean is a very good weapon because it increases the damage dealt to enemies with debuffs by 15% or 30% when maxed out. It is one of the best weapons a character can have. I mean, the limited is way better, but this is really, really good because it's a free damage increase just cause. Because Eleanor has a bunch of skills that inflict debuffs. Then deals damage and makes the enemy wet for 5 seconds. The active, though synergistic with what Eleanor does, is not that impressive. For 5 particles, inflicting wet for 5 seconds is not like that great. There's 4 ways to inflict wet. With Eleanor's weapon, with Eleanor's skills, that's multiple skills so that you know, with Eleanor's limited supporter when on the main, and with Eleanor, the character release limited supporter for Eleanor on the main too. So yeah, like, it is good, but because of the passive, not the active. The active doesn't help that much to the wet synergies, just so that you know. Then we have Falling Heart. Falling Heart is probably the default weapon that you want for Phantasma, and probably this is going to be better than her limited. Like, we already have a case of that with Lina. So what does this do? Basic attack inflict enemies with Nightmare at a 30% chance for 10 seconds and increases damage dealt by 20% for 10 seconds. So unfortunately it's not guaranteed, but 60% is a good number. Especially because Phantasma's basics do multi-hit, so you have an actual chance to inflict the debuff. The debuff normally only activates when Phantasma uses a skill, but only for the first hit of the skill. So you have to wait a lot to build up the the true effect of Nightmare. Nightmare, when you get 10 stacks, it's going to reduce the defense of the enemy. But the issue is cycling to that because you have to wait for the skills. So if you can do it with the basics, this becomes super consistent and super busted. The active is a whatever active, but the passive is really good for Phantasma. So yeah, you do want to build this one, and it's good for VR. The same can be said about Love Fist Drop and Treasure of the Deep Ocean. Yomatsu is usable on VR, but it's not like very good. Skeletal Tartarus. Skeletal Tartarus is bad because it only has an active that deals damage and increases damage to all enemies by 30%, well 15% or 30% for 10 seconds. So what's the issue here? That you only get the benefit for 10 seconds and it's a 6 particle active. So yeah, the number is really good. 30% is really nice. But for how long, the duration is also fine, but if the particle cost was like 3, it would be a very good weapon, but it's not. Then we have Ignis Blade. Ignis Blade is the renewal weapon, and this one is kind of unfortunate. It's usable, but it's awkward. It has a 50% chance to gain Ember when using a skill, and you can gain stacks of Ember up to 10 stacks. So when this weapon is maxed out, it's 100% it's guaranteed that you're going to get the Ember. And what's the effect of Ember? Ember increases the damage dealt by 3% per stack, and upon reaching 10 stack explodes, deals damage, and reduces the cooldown of a skill of all the skills by 15%. After the explosion, the stack effect disappears. So unlike the other one, you're going to get a more consistent buff that is going to last for longer. But the thing is that you have to build it up. And when it's finally built to max, it explodes and you lose the stacks. And it's like, oh. Like, that's what I don't like about this weapon. But the benefit of getting cooldown reduction is not that bad. So, yeah, you may use this one. Like, I have it at a good, at S level 3, I think. So maybe I can do some builds with this, but I'll have to test it. Then, Crystal Heart. Crystal Heart is good. It says drops a massive weapon in front to knock down the enemies, dealing damage, and restore 3% of HP. Restore 3% of damage dealt as HP. So yeah, it is a really good weapon because you get the HP restoration depends on the damage that you deal. So yeah, this is good for Noah. It's especially good if you want to go red or green, because on blue Noah has HP recovery. And Mr. Wonderbird is also a good weapon because it says increases speed by 8% when using a character skill summon familiars at a 32% chance for 8 seconds every 3 seconds. Increase damage by 10% per each familiar summoned. So you're gonna basically get like 20% damage increase if you get lucky. Like, the more copies, the easier it is for you to summon the familiars. And you have a skill that summons familiars, just so that you know. So yeah, it is good. The speed increase is also pretty good. So it is a pretty competent weapon. I wouldn't say busted, just competent. Then Starlight Navigator. Starlight Navigator has... It's weird. Reduces damage taken from demon type enemies by 20%. That's going to be 40% when maxed out. And that's pretty good. But this character, Astaroth, also has the Wicked Star weapon, which is the VR weapon. And it gives that effect and also damage increase against demons. So yeah, it is not great. Besides, you don't want an attacker like Astaroth to get damage reduction. You want them to get damage increase. I mean, the damage reduction is appreciated for sure, but it's more important to deal damage with an attacker than to tank the hits with an attacker. Then, the active performs an area attack by slamming down a meteor, dealing damage, and gains super armor for 6 seconds. This is like a mini supernova, which is fine, People used to like using this, but it's not that impressive. Like, if you don't have anything better, build it, but it's not the greatest option. And Undying Apophis. This is a must-have. It is just busted. I only have one copy, but it is really, really good. Reduces the damage of Supernova and Satellite Flare by 43%. When you increase the S level, this is going to be reduced. It's going to be like 20 something, or I don't know. I haven't seen it at S level 5, but I know that it gets reduced by a lot. So there's going to be a benefit for doing this damage reduction, and it's that it says double the amount of fireballs created and tracks the enemies. So Supernova is gonna hit twice, and Satellite Rate, if I'm not mistaken, is gonna hit like 6 times or 8 times, I don't remember. Then restore 2% of total HP when hitting a debuff enemy every 15 seconds. That's good. That you get HP recovery. That's nice, which Azeroth doesn't have. And this makes Satellite Rate an actually good HP recovery skill. Lastly, increases damage dealt by 20% when character HP is above 70%, which is going to be most of the time, so it is a pretty good weapon, just so that you know. It also rivals the VR weapon, so you may use this. You want to use this, trust me. Then Narakusan. Narakusan is a pretty meh weapon. Normal attack increase damage to target by 3% or 6% for 5 seconds. Stack up to 4 times. That's going to be 12% or 24%. And performs a jumping attack, deals damage, and makes the enemy in the area groggy. Yeah, it's just a whatever weapon. It's very unfortunate. Then Frozen Valkyrie. Oof, this one is good. This one is really, really good. When particles are fully charged, damage is increased by 28% for 8 seconds. That's going to be 56%. It's only 8 seconds, but another thing, you do want to use the active of this one. It's 5 particles, but it's worth it. So it says, deals attacks that are 560% of the damage and freezes them for 3 seconds. It's weird, but attacks the enemy, deals damage, and freezes the enemy for 3 seconds. Freeze is a debuff that isn't meant to last. You just hit after that, and that hit is going to get double damage. So it's pretty good, because you use Frozen Valkyrie's active, and then you use something like Rose Rondo, for example, and you're going to demolish the enemy. It's pretty good. Then for Felicia, both weapons are pretty good, but Reaper Wing is really, really great. Increases damage dealt to enemies with debuffs by 15% or 30% when maxed out. Felicia debuffs the enemy, just so that you know. And the weapon also debuffs the enemy, in case you don't have a build for that. Deals damage and makes the enemy bleed for 10 seconds. So that's pretty good. Trust me, you want to use this weapon. Remember, these are the options that you have available always. If you don't have limited weapons, these are good options. But if you have the limited weapons, probably those are better. Probably there are exceptions. Lapis Prism, don't use it. It's terrible. Increases critical rate of normal attacks by 15%. 30% when maxed out. Give me one moment. Water. So, deal damage and makes the enemy groggy with last hit. So, what's the issue? The basics are pretty bad, and it's only critical rate. That's the issue. Like, all the weapons that only give critical rate are bad because they don't increase your damage. Like, they technically do because they allow you to crit, but you will be able to crit, like, always, if you if you continue to play the game. Sorry. So it says, Georgius. This is for Rin. The passive increases skill damage by 13%, and the active deals damage and increases the speed by 10% for 10 seconds. It's just a meh weapon, but at least it has two meh effects that are good. They are not busted because the numbers are low, but both effects go to the right direction, so they're usable. Speed increase is nice, but it's only 10%. The duration is fine actually. The 10 seconds are fine. The skill damage increase is not even 15. If it was 15, it would be very good, but it's 13. But you can use it. If you don't have anything better, this is fine. Then we have Kumokiri. Kumokiri is one of the best weapons in the game. It increases damage dealt to bosses by 20%. That becomes 40%. Then the active deals damage and immediately restores 15% of lost HP. If you go with a mixed build, this is gonna be the way to heal Nagi. Nagi has HP recovery, but it has to be pure green, pure blue, or pure red to use that HP recovery. So yeah, this is super great, especially for VR. Because all your damage is going to increase. Not only the basics, not only the skill, everything is going to increase. So yeah, you want to use this one and enhance it and have it as level 5. It is one of the best weapons, permanent weapons in the game. Freikuga Samael. This one, similar to Su, is a pretty fun weapon. It is not like busted, it is not great, it is not good for VR, but it's super fun to use. Increases particle charge amount from attacks by 40%. That's the passive, and it goes up to 80%. Then, the active deals damage and stuns the enemy in the area. The thing is that because the passive gives you particle increase, you can use this with the basic enhancer that also gives you particle increase, and a couple supporters that give you particle increase, and you're going to just be able to use the active non-stop. It's super fun. I know it's not the greatest damage, but it is fun to do. You can check some runs on Sora, and she's fun. This one is the Mochi weapon. Round 0. This is bad. Increases basic damage by 20%, 40% when maxed out. Deals damage and reduces the enemy's speed by 10% for 5 seconds. So, what's the issue here? Only basic damage is increased, which is bad. If it was like skill damage, it would be better. If it was all damage, it would be better. And the issue here, it's only 10% on 5 seconds. If it was 20% on 5 seconds, I would consider it. If it was 10% on 10 seconds, I would consider it. But it's just too short of a duration and too low of a percentage. So yeah, both active and passive are not impressive. Then we have Silver Paladin. Silver Paladin is a must-have. You can use the limited equipment, you can use other options, but this one is really strong. Reduces damage from all enemies by 15%. You know how I said that Shiranoi's weapon was usable, but it has this little inconvenience of requiring you to have full particles, while Shisui doesn't have that. It's just free damage reduction. And Shisui works as a tank, so this is super great. It's, depending on what you want to do, it might be even better than the limited weapon, depending on what you want to do. Then deal damage and stun the enemy like a whatever active, that doesn't matter, but the passive is amazing. And then we're gonna finish with Crimson Executioner, which says increases speed by 5% and deals damage and disarm the enemy for 5 seconds. So the issue here is the low percentage and low duration. If this was 10% at base, it would be a good weapon. If this was 10 seconds, it would be a good weapon. But no, it isn't. So even at S level 5, the speed increase is just too small and the disarm duration is just too small. So it's usable, but it's not impressive. That's the issue with this weapon. So yeah, guys, that's about it. What do you think about all these weapons? Like, there are some weapons that are pretty meh, but there are some others that are like super fun, super busted. So tell me, which permanent weapons do you like? Which permanent weapons you're trying to build? And, well, that's gonna be it for today. And I'll be seeing you next time. Bye!